Good day, folks, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, of our billions and billions of viewers. You are tuning in to the Two Maesters. And today, we're talking about Twilight, the best show on earth. Woo! Yeah, that's right, you had it here. You are joined today by me, Morgan, your wonderful, fantastic host who doesn't really like Twilight, but I've spent the last week watching every single movie except for the last two. So I'll try my best to keep up to date. Hello Josh, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And I think for me, like with Twilight, I think like the concept and like the first two books, like my whole Twilight knowledge is based off my sister. She really wanted someone to watch it with her, so she first tricked me the first time to watch the first one, which I think was the worst of all four of them.
I agree.
And then I kind of like the second one, especially like the way that they portrayed the werewolves in it.
Yeah.
Because you usually have like poor CGI werewolves that they're literally always like
Yeah,
that all the time.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
But they did the visual effects of the werewolves are really good.
It's true, actually.
And then I wouldn't talk about like the ending of the last film because a lot of fans did push a bit back on that. My sister didn't like it at all. So it's kind of like I do enjoy the book series, but I just think like from the books, because my sister's told me about them, to the films, that there could have been more to make the films a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's probably a lot left to be desired. We'll see. And we are also joined by a wonderful guest. Wonderful guest, would you like to introduce yourself and say what kind of biscuit you love?
Yes, my name is Penny. I am a past Twilight super fan, present
Not
fan.
a still one, no.
My favourite biscuit is a bourbon.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be. I think
Hell
it's
yeah.
just all round.
I would have brought those today if Marks and Spencer's had them, but I'm sorry I let you down.
That's all right. These lemon and lime Jaffa cakes.
Yeah,
more than
most
enough.
unorthodox, aren't they? Yeah. So I guess we know already that you've seen the movies.
Yeah.
Have you read the books as well?
Yes, I read all of the
damn.
books.
Nice,
Obviously
okay.
seen all of the movies multiple times. I've reread the books as well. Breaking Dawn is my favourite book, without a doubt.
Is that book also split into two, or is that just the movie?
It's not split into two, but it is split up. So you have Bella's point of view, then you've got Jacob's point of view for a bit, which I kind of like skipped over most of the time. Because I was like, I don't care, Jacob.
That sounds like Team Jacob bullshit to me.
And then back to Bella's point of view. So you kind of get the suspense because it's split up in a similar way.
Yeah.
Hence the skipping over because you're like, I want to find out what happens to Bella.
I know there's a lot of book series are like that, like Game of Thrones is from different characters' point of view. But is that just Breaking Dawn that they do that with? So the other books, there's not different. It's always Bella.
It's always Bella in the other books, and then we go to Jacob, and he goes off on some. I don't think they really have this in the film. He goes off on some tangent and runs away and is a wolf for like months and just becomes a wolf in every way. And then comes back, and then that's when we find him, with the wolves, and they have all the conflict and everything like that. You don't know too much.
It's okay, you can spoil everything for me. Is that like with New Moon when he like first becomes a wolf? Like, is that when he runs off?
No, in Breaking Dawn he runs off because he's so heartbroken by... I think he's pretty much only heartbroken by the idea of Edward and Bella having sex while she's still a human, and it's like, are your morals that strong?
He's
okay.
What a bummer for him, honestly. I mean, heartbreaker, so a crush hurts, hence the name, a crush, So,
I thought of it that way.
As a summary, we always do this, that we have to like summarize what the novel is. We can't assume that our audience knows, although I'd be pretty impressed if we had a super fan out there that does not like Twilight but is listening to this episode.
Yeah.
So, the summary of the novel is Twilight is a 2005 young adult vampire romance novel by author Stephenie Meyer. It is the first book in the Twilight series and introduces 17-year-old Isabella Bella, in speech marks Swan, who moves from Phoenix, Arizona to Forks, Washington. She is endangered after falling in love with Edward Cullen, a 103-year-old vampire frozen in his 17-year-old body. Additional novels are New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn. Does that sound like a good summary? A young adult vampire romance novel?
I would say so. Yeah.
I
think
so.
it's pretty PG
Yeah,
most of the time.
it is, but there's something, I think like a key theme about this is forbidden love, isn't it?
Yeah.
That there's a
Yeah.
certain genre to it. Would you say there's any other books out there that fall into that forbidden love category of books or movies, TV shows?
Well, I think the biggest one is like Romeo and Juliet, which is
Yeah.
the biggest forbidden love. But I think
Of course, Shakespeare.
like a young adult, I think no, and I think that's probably why the books sold like hotcakes, and then so did the films, because it was like, okay, we've got Romeo and Juliet, which is full on Shakespeare literature.
Yeah.
We then have things that are more adulty, 15 or 18 level, or something for a younger audience that you then sometimes see. But I think it was like it filled a specific void at that point in time.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
definitely.
true, actually.
Like late teenage.
Yeah.
I guess mainly. Well, I assume it's mainly girls. This was focused towards. I mean, I as a 28-year-old guy watching the movies recently for the first time, I would give them a solid 6 out of 10. Like, I found them somewhat entertaining. I kind of preferred them to Harry Potter just a little bit.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a big
Controversial.
statement to make.
I've never been too crazy about Harry Potter, but I think just my feeling from the movies is that I love the sort of imagery of the forbidden love. Like, for example, in the first Twilight movie, you see Bella's in the canteen, she knocks an apple off the table,
Yes.
and Edward picks up in his hands like that, like forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
And again, every movie, they have the cover of the book
Somehow.
shown in the movie at some point, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
It is brilliant. I mean, I first read it, I think I was 11. I think I was in year 6, year 7.
Okay.
So at that age, I think it was probably appropriate for that kind of age. There isn't really anything too like racy
Yeah.
or crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is the forbidden love, and that's probably part of the attraction of it. And also partly you're like, this is the love I want. This is the passion and
Yeah.
that kind of thing that when you're a kid, that's what you think love is. It's like, oh, it's this amazing, like unconditionally, irrevocably. That's a quote from the books. In love with him. So
yeah.
it was that kind of pull that isn't necessarily healthy. You can enjoy it, but one should realize that it's not necessarily the picture of a healthy relationship.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if you were dating someone and you got bitten in the arm by a vampire, you definitely know that's a red flag and you should probably hang out with someone else.
Yeah.
So we know there's a theme of forbidden love. What other themes are there in Twilight, would you say?
I think one thing that it just came to me now, which also kind of like links back to forbidden love, is that if you two have like watched Buffy, it's something similar as well. That you've got like Spike and Angel, and then Buffy's going back and forth with either one of them, and like Angel's a nice,
right.
clean character who you really want her to be with, but then Spike is the bad boy that you also want her to be with as well.
That's a bad boy name as well.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
red flag.
And then another thing, I was just speaking to my sister like 2 weeks about doing the episode. She said it also reminds her like the Vampire Diaries as well.
Oh yeah.
That you've got the two brothers, Stefan and I've forgotten what his Damon.
Yeah.
That both of those, and they're both like in love with the main character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The love triangle is a massive element.
Is a massive element. I think that's what something that grips people as well because
So you saying there's a theme of love triangles? I guess there is, isn't
Yeah.
there? There usually is in these things.
I never really
Supernatural as
like
well?
love triangles that much, but I don't know if maybe subconsciously that's part of the pull, because otherwise what would much of the plot be for, especially for Twilight, a lot of it is Jacob and Edward sort of fighting over Bella and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like they're literally like the movie. I think maybe most of the movies I've seen, so Twilight, New Moon, and Eclipse, is just Bella one-on-one with either Jacob or Edward, just like arguing or like talking about love or Edward just trying to like push her away.
Yeah.
I would love to point out that the first Twilight movie, like Edward is basically negging Bella so much. Like when he first sees her, he ignores her, and then when they in the science lab, she walks in, and like she comes near him, he's like, oh, you stink. And look what she just like. She's just like, no, I love you.
It's giving when you're in primary school and it's like, oh, this boy was so mean to me. And it's like, oh, he definitely fancies me.
Exactly. So we'll run through each Twilight movie just very briefly now. So first Twilight film released in 2008. It got a $408 million box office on a budget of $37 million.
Wow.
What do you think the...
Sorry, I
have a very big laptop screen you're sitting next to me, so if you can, try not to look. But what do you think was the Rotten Tomatoes critics' review of it?
6?
Oh, they always do it percentage out of 100.
Percentage. Oh, God. I was thinking out of 10, so maybe 60%?
60. Generous. What would you
Generous,
say, Josh?
Right.
I know that critics didn't like it, but I know fans did. So maybe 57, maybe?
I wish I could give you guys that, but it's 49%. That's the critics' consensus, which I think is a little harsh. Yeah, I mean, not quite 50%, but I'd say that's 50%. And what do you think the audience score was on Rotten Tomatoes? Again, out of 100%.
Oh, this is separate. Audience. Probably like 60%.
What would you say?
I would say something similar, yeah, like 65.
God, you've gone too low, both of you, this time. Yeah, 77%.
Wow, woo!
Yeah. I mean, even if I didn't know those figures, I would have always assumed maybe the audience score would be higher for this stuff. So, we know what Twilight 1 is about. Kirsten Stewart, Robert Pattinson, a teenage girl going to this new town with her daddy, starting a new school, and then she comes across this hot boy and these vampires, etc. My sort of impression of this movie was that it was filmed like a teenage drama from like the noughties. Like if you look at the camera shots, they're all very cheesy and kind of cringy. They're trying to be arty with it, but in like a way that appeals to teenagers. I also think Edward was negging Bella, as you know already. Not cool. Any thoughts from you both on the first Twilight movie? What do you think?
Well, actually, I think it's funny because I think Robert Pattinson thought he was signing up for like an indie movie. I kind of think, I want to say that's kind of what it was meant to be. Because I think the director, is 37 million low budget?
Yeah.
Even for the noughties, I guess that is low budget, yeah.
I think that there was an element of we're treating this like a kind of indie film, like you say, how it was filmed.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Pattinson thought that he was signing on to that sort of thing, so just had no idea of like the scope that this was going to reach, which is so funny.
Yeah. And I actually I've got some trivia coming up later, but one piece of trivia is literally what you said. He wasn't really sure about the Twilight series. A lot of people who starred in the Twilight series didn't actually know. Like, for example, what's the guy, the Volturi guy? He's the leader of them.
Michael Sheen.
Michael Sheen. Yeah. He never read the books. He just asked his daughter for tips on who this guy he's playing was. So
yeah, he was pure vibes in all of the movies.
I think he's loving that role. I think the actor who enjoyed the show the most.
Literally.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I absolutely loved the movie. When I watch it now, I find it a little bit cringy.
To say the least.
I can't really pinpoint why. I think partly like Kristen Stewart, because what I will say is in the books, Bella is a lot more likable than she's portrayed in the movies. Like in the movies, she's super awkward and it's like quite difficult to watch at times, and it's like why are you like this? Why are you speaking like that? But in the books, she's really awkward and she's portrayed like that. But she's just a bit more likable with it, and it's not as awkward to read or watch or listen to.
Yeah, and I guess it's hard when you have a show or movie where you don't like the main character because you've got to have some sort of connection with them. Otherwise, you're just like, oh, every time I watch this, I hate them.
Yeah.
It's like Emily from. Have you seen Emily from Paris?
Yes.
Me and my friends love watching that show.
I was
binge
literally
watching
rewatching it today.
Yeah. Is it supposed to be a thing that you hate Emily, like the main character in it? Because she's so unlikable as the main character. Yeah. I hate the clothes she wears. She doesn't speak French well, though I don't either. It's very fun to watch, I think, to like just talk shit about someone.
Yeah, it's true. That's what people love about Twilight, I think. People love to just shit on Twilight, but...
Well, a lot of people questioned Kristen Stewart's acting throughout it. Like, she doesn't have many facial expressions, but I thought maybe that's the vibe she was trying to go for, but as you said, it's not like in the books.
I mean, I think she's a great actress. And when I was younger, I just made excuses for her not being the same because I was just so thrilled to have it in watching form.
Yeah, of course.
You know? And I would think probably a lot of maybe teenagers could relate to that sort of awkwardness. Whereas now if I watch it when I'm older, I'm kind of like, oh, get over it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I've been there, but I'm like, I can't relate anymore necessarily in the same kind of way.
Definitely.
So I wonder if that was the pull for many people and myself back in the day.
I think that's a theme they pick up on that you guys didn't pick up on when I asked the question earlier. That alienation, sort of teenage awkwardness. I guess also coming of age as well in a way. But I think to me, because obviously I haven't read the books, Bella comes across as like an introvert, shy, awkward, but even though she makes friends really quickly, she's like, she doesn't quite know or understand how to like be warm and like connected with them.
Like my sister was telling me, it's like even in her mum has the same thing as well. That her mum's also kind of like awkward with her, which they kind of do show a bit in the films. But like my sister was saying, in the books, she's actually a lot more awkward, and also like the mum and dad are divorced. So I think she actually loves spending more time with her dad than with her mum. And also because her mum's based out in Phoenix, so sometimes she goes out to Phoenix to visit her, and then it's kind of like sometimes you'd have these awkward conversations. But then I think also maybe her upbringing made her a bit awkward because like her dad's the sheriff of this town, and then her mum's now moved on to someone else and has started up a brand new life in Phoenix, and now she's living in a dreary old town where she doesn't know anybody.
And everyone knows each other, so she's the talk of the town. She comes in halfway through the school year, which is like never easy for anyone. And people are calling her Isabella, and she doesn't like being called Isabella. She likes to be called Bella, that kind of thing. And her dad talks about her to his mates and his friends, and then everyone talks within the town. So there's that kind of probably like self-awareness as well, where it's like everyone knows who I am, even though I don't know anyone else.
Especially that her dad's the sheriff as well, which adds extra awkwardness.
Anyone
who messes around is like, oh, it's your dad's fault. And then to your point, like the fact that he's a pillar in the community is then everyone will then start, if she's an introvert, going to speak to her. Oh, so welcome to the town. And then I think it probably happens to both of you. Don't you feel at times like when you go somewhere and you don't know anybody, but everybody knows who you are, that's a bit awkward?
Obviously because of this podcast, because of our billions of views, that happens everywhere with us. But I do know what you mean in all seriousness. And I think this show picks up on that really well. Also, favourite character in the whole show. I will keep my opinion to myself for now. Who's your favourite character?
Oh. I was thinking about this. I think I probably back in the day probably would have said Bella. Just because, you know, I also when I was younger I wanted everything to be how it was meant to be. Do you know what I mean? Team Edward, maybe we'll get into that later. I was Team Edward because she wanted to be with him. He was the one that got it first. Like that kind of thing. And I liked Bella from the books. She was the main character. She was the one you meant to like. So I was like, cool. Yeah, Bella. But nowadays, like, Charlie is a great character. Like, he's so funny. Yeah.
hands down, I was going to keep it to
So
myself, but the
good.
dad is my favourite character.
He's so funny.
He's kind of the comedy element in the show, I guess. Like, for example, one scene in Eclipse is Bella and Edwards, like, start talking to the dad and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to go see, we've got 2 flights to see Bella's mom in Arizona. And the dad just goes, love that. His sarcasm is excellent.
Yeah,
like,
he's brilliant.
and he's kind of hot, you know. I'm digging
Yeah.
him. I mean, I'm digging the moustache thing.
Mhm.
Kind of cute because he's a hopeless romantic. I mean, I only watched
Yeah.
up to the third movie. Up to the third movie. Does he ever in the books? Does he ever like I don't know date?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
he does.
Oh, that's
So
so
you know,
awesome.
I don't know if you meet. Yeah, you meet Leah Clearwater, who is one of the wolves. So she's traditionally, if you're a wolf, you're a man, and you form into a wolf at some point in your life if there are
Yeah.
loads of vampires around. But she was a woman who became a wolf, so she was like part of the pack.
Yeah.
And she had a brother who was also in the pack, Seth. Sadly, their dad dies, who was Charlie's friend.
Okay.
Explaining it now, I'm kind of like, and then he dates their mum.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Daddy's coming to help him out.
And not to like jump the films, I think, didn't he have the heart attack in the second film?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
you're right. He
Victoria.
did,
Victoria
yeah.
was
Yeah.
basically was going to kill Charlie. He
Yes.
then turns
Steps
his
in,
gun,
yeah.
and then she then chokes him, and then the wolves chase her, and then that's
Yes.
when he has the heart attack.
Bless him. Yeah.
Wait, and that's his wife. Then
No.
Charlie goes, oh no, this is he's
Yes.
Yeah.
a different relative. Okay, I was about to say it's like he saves your life, and then you date his. What is that?
No, that is his. I think that is his wife he dates, but I don't think he knows because he doesn't see Victoria at all.
Right. Okay.
So what happens is that because this is like jumping to the second film. So Victoria is trying to kill Bella because what was her mate called?
James.
Oh, James. Yeah.
Because James was then killed by the Cullens.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he wanted to kill Bella.
Mhm.
So now she wanted to get revenge on Bella Victoria. And because the Cullens had left, she thought it would be an easy target. But then the wolves were then keeping her at bay and constantly chasing her around the village.
Yeah, she was so annoying. Like
Yeah.
for 3 movies, she would just like
Yeah.
they were just
She
chasing
said
her.
absolutely nothing. In
Yeah.
the movie.
And then they change actors for
Yeah.
Twilight Eclipse. I think it's like Dallas Bryce.
It was
Howard?
Bryce Dallas Howard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's her name.
Is it
Random
Dallas
change.
Bryce Howard? Which way?
I don't know. Maybe Bryce Dallas Howard. blah 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 blah. So we might as well move on to Twilight New Moon now. So this came out in 2009. Interesting thing about all the movies is year after year after year they pumped them out. So like Twilight 1,
Really?
2008, Twilight 2,
Wow.
2009, Twilight Eclipse, 2010. I don't know
Non-stop.
why they did that. Was it maybe because they were worried the actors were going to age too quickly?
Possibly.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, or maybe what they tried to do was like strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I think she written all the books before the first film came out. Because I think she
Yes.
if she
Yeah,
if
so
she did, I think what they realized is that okay, then we've got a set amount of time period between people, for example, your age or 11,
Yeah.
up to let's say first year of university.
Mm.
We've got the script, we've got everything we need. So
latch onto that market.
unlike Harry
Yeah.
Potter, that actually had to kind of slow down a bit
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that J.K. Rowling could then finish the rest of the books. It's
Yeah.
like Lord of the Rings was like almost back to back to back because
As well,
they
okay.
had all. I think the first one was 2001, the second one was 2002, and the third one was 2003.
God, it must be a hectic
Yeah.
work environment being.
But I think they
filmed
realised
so
like
much.
because we have everything we need, we can then film multiple scenes.
Yeah.
So, for example, we're going to be in this scene where we're going to be fighting at Mordor, and then we can film the second scene in the second film, something like that.
yeah.
So, therefore, they can cut costs and cut time by
Yeah.
saying, well,
Swap around. some
we've
of the
got,
props.
they've given us a contract for X amount of films, we know the plot, so let's just continue writing to then speed up the process. Because then, if there was a gap, then potentially you could get like a loss of like something else could then come in, and then like for example, at the end point of like Twilight Hunger Games
Yes.
came in, and then that was the book that young people were
Yeah.
into, and then those films. So maybe they were like, this is a perfect time, we've got the audience, they're reading the books, let's pump these films out as quick as possible.
Oh,
Yeah, that's so
capitalism
true.
is so good, isn't it? And we will do the Hunger Games episode at some point as well. That's got to be spoken about. I don't know why we haven't done that yet.
So good.
And yeah, going back to your point about the books. So first book came out in 2005. The film came out in 2008. And then Twilight New Moon, that movie came out in 2009, but the book came out in 2006. So Stephanie was also writing pretty quick as well. And it was year after year as well with her. So especially knowing that she finished writing or published Breaking Dawn in 2008, and that's when the first Twilight came out. So she's like, damn, I'm actually... I mean, not often that many writers actually become that successful and have an adaptation made so damn quickly.
Yeah.
Like she, apparently she got rejected like 9 times. The 10th time, with this publisher, she got in because it was a junior publishing executive's first day. Normally, like, novels of her type should be, I think it was like 5,000 pages long or 5,000. She did it like 10,000, and normally that would just be instant rejection. But apparently this junior executive was new on the job and just accepted it.
Way.
Wow.
And she just made it out of
Imagine that.
luck, really. I mean, that was very lucky. Like, well done to her.
Wow.
Like people like, for example, Terry Pratchett, who wrote the Discworld novels. I mean, he wrote those when he was a lot younger, and then they just got famous when he was older. So pretty crazy.
She makes a cameo in Twilight.
Which one?
In the first one,
Okay.
they're in Bella and Charlie are eating in like the place they go to, the restaurant. The pub, whatever they call it. And then she's
she's
at
the
the bar.
waitress.
She's not the waitress, but she's like sat at the bar, and then I think the bartender asks her a question.
Okay, because I was wondering.
Getting a little cameo in.
That's cool. I like it when writers do that.
Yeah.
Like, as well as a cameo from, well, he's not a writer, but Peter Jackson cameos in Lord of the Rings quite a lot. Oh, that's cool. I was wondering because there was a waitress in that restaurant who just some reason had like a couple of lines like, is that someone special that I should know or something?
No
But anyway,
place.
so going back to Twilight Saga New Moon, came out in 2009. The book was 2006. The box office for this was a whopping $711 million. The budget was $50 million.
Oh, wow.
I really think, for me, this is when I noticed Twilight, because I think I remember seeing people reading the books in school, like with the apple on it. But when this came out, that was marketed everywhere, and like all the girls were talking about it in my school. I just didn't want to talk about Twilight. But you just see all these buff posters of Taylor Lautner as Jacob and all these hot
Yeah, this is when he
topless
cuts
boys.
his hair.
Yeah. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes critic score was for Twilight New Moon?
Critic. They hated it, didn't they?
They did.
Really?
What was it for Twilight?
49.
49.
49.
Well remembered.
I feel like this they would have liked New Moon a bit better though.
Yeah.
I saw you look at the screen.
I can see it, but I can't see it. 52.
52, what about you?
Maybe I'll be optimistic. 61.
28%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is shocking.
That is really bad.
That is really rough.
That's just rude, actually. I think there's some sort of bias.
Because
there.
the second film is a lot better than the first.
I would say
Yeah.
so, yeah. I really think the Twilight films actually got better as it went on. Like, I think Twilight 1 just looked really tacky and was kind of cringe. Whilst Twilight New Moon, some elements I really liked was the soundtrack was really good.
Yes.
And they sorted out the tacky camera angles. So, you know, when Edward breaks up with Bella
Yeah.
and she's very depressed and she's sitting in her room, there's that cool camera scene where it's just
Yes.
a camera like going around her in a circle and like the seasons are changing and
There's
Yeah.
a possibility.
yeah, that song by Likely.
So depressing, but wonderful.
Yeah, and I actually was like, oh, this is actually kind of a lot more professional looking
Yeah.
and like I could appreciate it in a more arty way.
Yeah. I think a lot of criticism comes from like her huge emotional reaction to the breakup, because they probably would have only known each other for like a few months or something at this
Yeah.
point. So I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, why would you be so upset about that? But when you're younger, and even now, like, a breakup is horrific, especially when it's in such a rejection manner,
Yeah.
like Edward does it in the forest.
Yeah.
He goes, I don't want you to come. Like, with your first love, how is that going to feel? I mean, I remember when I was younger, I was crying on the floor. Do you know what I mean? I would have done
Yeah.
exactly the same kind of thing as Bella.
Definitely.
And I think that's where probably a lot of the criticism comes from, and a lot of the hatred, where people are just like, why would you like something like this? But actually, again, back to relatability. People probably relate to it a lot.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, also, like, just that scene when he breaks up with Werner, where it's like, we need to go away. That's my family and me.
Yeah.
And then there's just awkward silence. It's like, you're not coming?
Yeah,
And like,
literally.
God, you could just, like, phrase it better. I know
Yeah.
he's, like, got this whole vibe of, like, I'm bad for you, you should stay away from me. But he could really phrase a lot of his stuff.
lot better.
Yeah.
100%. Especially because she's so insecure. Because
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much it comes across in the movies, but in the books, it's like, he is this god. And he wants me. She's like, how is this
Yeah.
possible? Like, I'm so blessed. Like, I'm so lucky. And then she's so insecure in that. And then he just does what she most is fearing.
Yeah.
And that must be, like, brutal. And then
Yeah.
she has the night terrors. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
fair
she's
enough.
proper,
Like,
yeah.
she's been, like, almost killed by, like, a vampire.
Yeah.
She's not safe in her own home.
She's traumatized.
I probably
yeah.
wouldn't be sleeping
Yeah.
at all.
And like based on what you were just saying now, like the fact that she was then shown like a whole world that she didn't know existed, and now has
Yeah.
been told that's now been cut off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no protection, like
Like-
nothing.
And also the fact, one thing I do like what Stephanie Myers did was she brought like a new look on how vampires are, because everything
Yes.
is still the same old tropes with steaks and garlic and sunlight, and some of them is like crossing water or holy water. Like you see from like the first film, the only way you can actually kill them is by either you basically have to get other vampires to just rip them to shreds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then burn
and
them.
then burn them.
Yeah. Because they can come back together if you don't burn them.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That's
And-
pretty cool.
And the fact I understand, I don't understand like the criticism of like her breaking down, because one, someone in like a brand new town where she's awkward, and I think
Yes.
like some people didn't like her because she then started dating Edward,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
they're like, oh,
jealous.
he's the most attractive guy in school. This girl out of nowhere who's an introvert, she comes and he's now dating her.
Yeah.
So then now imagine like going to school the next day. And then it's like, yeah, he's gone. And also, yeah, he dumped her
It's
as well.
funny because
Yeah.
that actually happened in my school, not the whole vampire thing, but just
Really?
this new like French kid that came to school and like
Ooh.
he started dating this girl, and I just remember like a bunch of girls just kept talking crap about her because
Oh.
let's be honest, they were jealous.
Yeah, obviously. I think as well, a lot of outside criticism comes because Bella is so awkward and just horrified in any kind of social situation.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, she's conventionally pretty, you know, everyone is really like, seems to like her, and she makes friends really easily. She's super popular. So like, how is she just convincing herself that she's just this awkward person who like doesn't like to be around people, that kind of thing? Which I kind of get to an extent. But at the same time, within yourself, you can be, you know, whatever, you can be outwardly easily able to make friends, outwardly pretty, etc. But maybe on the inside, that's not how she feels, and that's not like
Yeah.
her reality, because you can be maybe, you know, socially.
You can just lack like self-confidence
Yeah.
and self-esteem, and
Yeah.
it's funny because like a thing you think when you're growing up is like pretty people must like have the world on a silver platter for them, but
Yeah.
I've got like a couple of friends who are like basically like look like supermodels, and some of them I just knew when they're growing up just had like no self-esteem, and because people would gravitate towards them and want to talk to them, they just wouldn't have any social skills and
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
I could go on a rant about that for a long time, but it's interesting. Ironically, you could be really pretty but just still have no self-esteem or no social
Yeah,
skills.
100%. I understand like a lot of the criticism to do with that, but I feel like if we're really going to go into it and we're really going to go into, you know, human
Yeah, and
mentality,
Yeah.
it's just never as straightforward as it
Yeah.
seems.
it always starts with Twilight.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does. So relatable.
Were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna like agree with both of you that you do have like, and even I think it was like an interview. I've forgotten who it was. Someone who was extremely famous. I think it was Angelina Jolie, and she was saying that the main issue she had was that because the way she looks and because she's very attractive, people believed a perception of her,
Yeah.
which she then was like, well, for me to then fit in, I must now meet into that perception.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until like she was getting into her mid-30s to late 30s that she actually, people were like, no, she can actually act. She's not just attractive.
Yeah.
She then was able to then be her actual true self.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
people were like, but you're Angelina Jolie. You've been voted like the sexiest woman alive for 3 or 4 times. You're married to, at the time, to Brad Pitt. Like, how can your famous actress, how can you have any form of like insecurity?
Yeah.
She's like, no, you can. Because
Yeah.
people have this perception of who she should be. And then she's like, no, that's not who I am. I'm this person.
Yeah.
But felt like for me to do well and become like a better actress and actually increase my popularity, I have to be this Angelina Jolie. And like my sister was telling me, like, Beyonce has it that she has someone she calls like Sasha Fierce.
Yeah.
That is the Beyonce that the fans see, but the actual Beyonce knows that her family sees and who she actually is somebody else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how she's able to cope with it.
No, I mean, there must be a thing about being such a famous superstar. That, like, there must be some psychological issues just associated with that, and you having to put on an act all the time.
100%.
Hopefully, that'll be us one day when we made it big. I mean, we have made it big already. So
Yeah, with the
correction.
billions. Of
Yeah, exactly. Billions. That's right. You had it right here. So, one particular thing about Twilight Saga New Moon is obviously Jacob suddenly gets, hotter in it. And he cuts his hair, and Bella, because of Bella's breakup, she's like, "Oh, Jacob, I got these new bikes I need you to fix." And I loved Bella's dynamic in it. Her intention was so obvious. Like, after they finish fixing the bikes, she kind of goes up to Jacob for like, kind of like a hug, you know, but obviously an intimate one, and he doesn't notice, but he just keeps walking, and you can just see the awkwardness on Bella's body language straight away. I think Kirsten Stewart does the awkward thing very well. And
Yes, she does.
it really showed up in this. And another thing about Bella is she's bored by human life. She looks at her human friends at school, like they're just talking about prom dresses, and the guys are just kind of like awkward and I wouldn't say creepy, but inappropriate. Like, what's the name of that guy at school that once Bella seems to be getting out of her depression, he comes over to her and is like, "Oh, so now that you look like you're doing good and stuff, do you want to
Yeah.
hang out sometime?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't remember what was his name.
Mike,
yeah.
He's so funny.
The cinema scene is
How you like
excellent.
in the rain, Arizona?
yeah. Yeah. I hate him. He was the worst character in it, worse than James.
He should have been in place of James.
Yeah, exactly. They should have torn him apart. And I love the cinema scene as well with the freezer crowd cinema scene. You know, they go see.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, the action
Yeah.
movie. That was quite funny. I actually.
And Mike has to go and throw up.
Yeah.
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 I love that.
Very good.
But it just goes to show how many different types of characters that Stephenie Meyer's created. It's not like she's just done like one type of person, but like the depth of the characters, even with Mike Newton, we all have, like, he's such a small character, but we all have such opinions on him, and we see like even just like some of the depth of his character in the fact that he can't watch an action movie and feels a bit sick.
Character
Whether or not he had
development,
food poisoning, we don't know. That kind of thing. I think it just brings like an extra like depth to the whole saga, which is already huge. You know, already like all of the vampire stuff, all of that she had to think about, but then she already does it with the smaller characters as well, which I think is great.
Yeah.
And I think especially like with this book and film, you then see like it starts off with like everything supernatural, but then goes back to like, okay, so back to normal life for Bella. And then I think one thing she realizes, and also the audience then sees, is like she can't go back to it.
Yeah.
And I think also the way
It's
that the
too boring
book
for
and the
that.
film portray it, they do it quite well.
Yeah.
And I think that's when they then speed on to like the werewolves, and then also they talk about like the disappearances in the town.
Yeah.
So then you then start to think, what is actually going on? Are vampires coming back to the town? Or,
Yeah.
and I think another thing is that they don't fully tell you like the boundaries of supernatural, because like usually in films or TV shows, it's like, okay, there's only vampires, or there's only zombies, or there's only werewolves, or there's
Yeah.
werewolves, vampires, witches, zombies, mummies, everything. So
Yeah.
then when you're like people are disappearing, you're thinking, is it vampires or could it be
Mm.
something else?
Yeah.
Bigfoot.
True, we don't know.
Could be,
You never
yeah.
know.
They always do this with shows, like for example, True Blood. It starts off just vampires,
Yeah.
and then other like things trickle in, like
Mm.
fairies.
And then they
like,
go full board, everything
Oh, yeah.
is
Yeah.
We need to do an episode on. I fucking love True Blood. That's like my favorite vampire show. Okay, let's move on to Twilight Saga Eclipse, which came out.
Just
Oh, go
one
on,
thing
Fred.
to add on. I think another thing I did like was that you then kind of got, was it this film or the next film, you got the origin story of like where the werewolves came from.
This film. Yeah.
And that you actually realize they're not actually werewolves, they're actually shapeshifters.
Yes.
And that
Oh,
the
right.
chief at the time, he could shapeshift into anything, but then his rival stabbed and killed his actual body.
Yes.
So what they do is they would jump from, they could like move their spirit from one body to another. So
Mhm.
that's what they used to be able to do. But then his rival killed his actual body, so he couldn't come back into his body. So then he had to then join a wolf and then
Ah,
combine
right.
with a wolf. So therefore he then became like an actual like werewolf.
What, completely 100%?
Yeah.
Couldn't change back.
No, he could. He was able to then change
Okay.
back. I think he might have like made a pact with the wolf, so therefore he would then be able to turn into the wolf and then also turn into a person. And then his descendants, which is everyone within like Jacob's tribe, had then took on that trait.
Yeah.
So
Very
then-
well remembered. That is
Yeah.
actually an eclipse. I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking this wasn't a new moon. God damn it, guys. I'm screwing the order. Well, we were going to move on to Eclipse
Yeah.
anyway, so that makes sense. So Twilight Eclipse came out in 2010. It was based on a 2007 novel by Stephanie. $712 million box office. That's 1 million more than Saga New Moon. Wow, crazy. And the budget was 68 million. So you see that making that dollar, and it's slowly amping up. And I guess with the CGI for the wolves and
Oh,
stuff, they've
yeah.
got to do it. Yeah. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes critics score was?
I think it's hard to say because it's like the
You got
worst
it wrong,
film's
you
49,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
literally.
then now
That's
gone
a good
down to the
point.
20s. You're like, 35 maybe.
35?
40?
46%.
Oh, okay.
You guys are
Okay.
slowly getting that. I thought this one was, the audience score was 60%, by the way. So I think based on all of the audience scores, the first Twilight movie was the highest at 77%. I still think it got better. I quite liked Eclipse as well, mainly because it's the one I can remember most recently. But it was cool. You saw more of the Volturi in a way, although in Saga in New Moon you see that as well.
Yeah.
I guess that's something we've got to mention. The Volturi were very cool, very Italian, very stylish, men of science and culture, as Edward regarded them. And then in Eclipse, you get like a rogue element of the Volturi, building up a vampire army with Victoria's helping, the wonderful Victoria that just runs around and doesn't say much.
Yeah.
And they try and take down the Cullens. I mean, it was pretty cool. It felt very formulaic. Felt like it was just a very tried and tested formula. Like I'm pretty sure in Harry Potter that's very similar, that the Death Eaters are building up an army or something. We must stop them before it's too late. What do you guys think of Eclipse?
I think, because this is the book I actually did read, I think the film didn't portray it as well as the books did. So one of the things within the lore that Stephanie Myers wrote for vampires is that they're extremely strong when they're younger.
Yeah.
But then what happens is they're hard to control. They can't really control their urges. So what Victoria was trying to do was develop a very, very strong army and then just overwhelm the Cullens. And also one thing we also forgot to mention is that in her universe, vampires have special powers as well.
Yeah.
Not even
which
touched
is
now.
which is something weird. So like Edward can, I think,
Read
Read
minds.
read minds, but
yeah.
can't read Bella's. What are the other ones?
Alice can see the future.
Alice can see the future.
Yeah, I love Alice. She's a great character. She's
She
just
is
so
great.
weird. We're going to be great friends.
Yeah.
And then, there's that Volturi
Who can
blonde
see?
girl.
Yeah, who can? What she
Cause
can do
pain.
is cause pain, and
Yeah.
her brother can cause like the person to be completely numb, so
Yes.
not see, feel, just basically take away all of their senses.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
wow.
got like a mist
Yeah.
that he sends over.
That's pretty
It
cool.
is pretty cool.
I wish
And
I
the
had that.
Volturi, all of their kind of team is the wrong, like coven. They've built them all up because they all have powers.
Yeah.
Mm.
So they want to create just the most like powerful team of vampires because they are kind of the law setters,
Yeah.
but there is obviously some resistance and they're not necessarily good, you know? Like
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
as
they-
we come across.
They're still not vegetarians. And there's actually that kind of dark scene in New Moon where
The
Bella
tour-
and Edward are like,
the tourists that come.
yeah, the tourists.
Yeah,
I actually found that a
is
little bit funny
brutal.
because there's like people who hate tourists.
Yeah.
like, in busy touristy cities like Rome, they probably hate tourists, so they were like,
Brilliant.
and they sort of, bravo. But so they agree that Edward agrees that he has to turn Bella into a vampire,
Mhm.
and the Volturi are like, yeah, you got to do it soon.
And also the fact that the Volturi want to bring in Edward and also Alice as well.
Mhm.
So they've always kept tabs on the Cullens, and they kind of want them to
Be
basically.
recruited.
What's the father called again?
Carlisle.
They wanted basically the family to disband, so they can then bring Alice and also
Yeah.
Edward into their group to set up like a super group of vampires. And I think you do kind of. I might be mixing up the order, but then you do kind of also find out that, well, maybe later on, that the Volturi actually knew the attack was going to happen,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but did nothing about it because they kind
Mhm.
of like encouraged it as well because they were like,
Yeah.
as long as Edward and Alice are fine, we can then snatch them up and they can now join us. And now
Shady.
the Cullens, these
So shady.
vegetarian vampires, are now also off the table as well.
Yeah. And the Volturi are then even stronger if they have
Yeah.
them too.
Yeah.
Unstoppable.
They're pretty cool bad guys, and they've been memed so much. Like that meme of, I think it's from the painting. They're looking at a painting, and Edward's telling Bella about the Volturi and New Moon, and it's like where they're wearing the 17th century gowns, looking down from the balcony.
Yes.
That meme has been going strong for a very long time. Like, that's applicable in so many places. Like people who have semi-skimmed milk looking down on people who have almond milk. You know what I mean? Like I've seen some pretty not safe for work ones as well on that, but it's excellent. Okay, so I only watched up to Twilight Saga Eclipse. I am aware of what happens in Breaking Dawn, but perhaps it might be best if one of you guys tell me. So I'll just run through Breaking Dawn Part 1.
I think I've got a bit more to say about Eclipse.
Oh yeah, go on, go for
I'm
it.
not done with it.
I'm not done yet.
Done yet. So I started rereading this book recently
Oh wow.
because I just thought, why not? I had it like a physical version that I found in my room, so I was like, let me give it a go. And I just couldn't finish it because. So first of all, I'd actually watched recently. Have you heard of Cinema Therapy?
No.
No.
It's a YouTube channel, and there's basically a film director and a therapist. He's a relationship therapist, and they watch movies together. And then they talk about the movies, talk about how it's made, why they liked it, why they didn't like it, and then they talk about the relationships within it, and kind of like analyze the relationship. The therapist is like, "This is a healthy relationship. This isn't."
Oh, I can't
So
wait to hear
they
this,
do
yeah.
all of the Twilights,
Oh,
which
excellent.
I watched recently, and it was, you kind of know it,
Yeah.
but it just confirms it all for you when they're literally going through everything and going, yeah, that's like coercion. That's gaslighting.
Yeah, Edward definitely. That Edward, he
It's
definitely
terrible,
gaslights Bella.
completely.
Yeah, it's messed up.
And like even Jacob, like just kissing her like
Yeah,
without her
non-consent,
consent, like Charlie, our unproblematic king, was a bit problematic in Eclipse when Jacob kisses Bella. And he's like, oh, well done, Jacob. Like, he's Team Jacob. And he's like, yeah, whatever, you can kiss my daughter without her consent whenever.
Yeah,
it's like she literally risked
really
breaking
up.
her hand. So, because she didn't want him to kiss her.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually.
So I came across that and I was a bit like, that's weird. And then even with that, like, Edward's quite controlling. Like, I think, it was just a lot. And then you have you learn about the whole imprinting thing with the werewolves.
Yeah,
I remember hearing this.
I
know what happens in Breaking Dawn, which is a bit weird, the imprinting.
It's a bit weird, but you're introduced to it in Eclipse. I think maybe it's brief. I don't know if it's in Eclipse. It might be briefly in Eclipse, the movie. But in the book, you're introduced to some of the other wolves who had imprinted already.
Right.
You learn about the concept of it. And then you learn that one of the werewolves has imprinted on a toddler.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, it's platonic. And it's kind of described where it's like, oh, yeah, like, he'll be her protector until a certain point, and then they'll probably, like, get together. And to me, when I read that again, I was like, because when I was younger, I was like, yeah, it's platonic. Like, it doesn't matter until they get to an age. And, like, he'll be whatever she wants him to be, but, like, the magic will probably, keep them together, keep them as a bond. And I just thought that's literally grooming. Like, that is the definition of grooming.
Yeah. And I think, even to just your point, like, if you look at, like, Buffy, it's kind of the same thing. Because, like, I think she joins, because there's 3 seasons when she's at high school.
Yeah.
So therefore that means she must join when she's 16. And
Right.
Angel's like a 400-year-old vampire.
Yeah.
And like the fact that they're actually having a relationship until she graduates, you then start to think to yourself, like, wait a second. And I only thought about it when you just said it now, because I was like, that is true. And also, like, even like in Vampire Diaries, she's also a high schooler.
Yeah.
And the 2 Salvatore brothers are at least 140, 150 years old.
Yeah.
And
they're just hanging out at high school.
Like, just because they're stuck looking that age doesn't mean that they are. And then it's not still creepy.
I mean, even in this, it's easy to forget that Edward is 103 years old.
Yeah.
The one thing I think that's kind of nice that they do in Twilight is that, when Bella's in Eclipse, Bella's like, okay, if we're going to get married, there's one thing you have to, one thing I must ask that you must do for me. And then they're like, oh yeah, she's going to get it all. Then he's like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm that old fashioned, I was turned in like literally just after World War One. So like, the society he grew up in. I like how they actually took that into account, that he's got traditional values.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And also the fact that, just to like piggyback on like some of the lore, he also was turned during like the Spanish influenza.
Yeah.
And like he was on his deathbed. And I think he was the first person that Carlisle had actually turned.
Yeah.
And then who was the
so
you had
the one
Alice.
that hates Bella.
Yeah, Esme.
Rosalie.
Rosalind, basically Edward's like adopted sister.
Yeah.
You also found out that she had a huge crush on Edward for a long period of time, and then he kept on just rebuffing her, and that's why she hates Bella so much.
That's right.
Really?
Yeah, because she was like, I'm a vampire, you're a vampire. And she's been like trying to get a relationship with him for quite some time. So she was like, okay, maybe he doesn't want to be in any relationship whatsoever. But then Bella comes out all of a sudden. And remember, she's supposed to be like looking like the best woman on the planet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then to then be like, so wait, you're going with her and she's not even a vampire, she's human.
Yeah.
And I think that caused like huge animosity between them.
But I thought it was also because there's a scene I think it's in Eclipse, where you find out how she got turned, the circumstances, because she was raped and she was left very badly injured, and then Carlisle comes in, and then she got revenge, which, talking about this with my partner, she said this is the best scene in Eclipse, and everything else in Eclipse is kind of not so good, but that was a very cool scene. That whole backstory, and
Yeah.
I thought the whole reason why she disliked Bella was because of that jealousy, because she has a choice and she's choosing to turn. It's like, you don't want this.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
and
another
Rosie
reason.
never
Yeah.
wanted
Movie,
to
yeah.
be a vampire. Like,
Yeah.
she wanted to be human. She wanted to grow old. She wanted to have a baby. I think is the
Mhm.
baby is the main
Yeah.
thing.
And
Yeah.
you also see it a bit in the last film, Breaking Dawn, as well.
Yeah.
That she's really supports Bella, and it's like all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're like, and then you realize based on the backstory that she actually wanted a child, and
Yeah.
then having a child in the family would then be something nice, and then she
Aw.
supports Bella through and through.
Yeah, it's lovely.
That's
Yeah.
sweet. She got the half human, half vampire, weird child hybrid
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Also, who's Alice's husband?
Jasper.
Jasper, and I think we also find out that Jasper wasn't turned by Carlisle.
Yes,
Yeah.
even with Alice
Yeah.
actually.
And like he was turned during the Civil War period.
Yeah, you do find that out.
And then
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
that's why he's then the one who then teaches them tactics, especially like when the werewolves and also the vampires then come together to realize we've got a huge army coming and we can utilize the werewolves' abilities to then
Yeah.
which funnily enough they've honed as well, and they're perfect to kill vampires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because later on, it might have been in Eclipse, you learn that the chief of their town, he had grown old. I think it was like in over 100 years old because he'd made that pact and was living for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then these vampires then attacked their village,
Yeah.
and then they were fighting, and he was about to die. So his wife basically cut herself, so the vampire would then
Yeah, that's a
attack
cool
her,
scene.
and then they were able to then rip the vampires apart, and that's why Bella then tries to do
Yes.
the exact
Yeah.
same thing in Eclipse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
To
the
save the
vampires
day.
are like,
Yeah.
they're like, that happens anytime someone makes coffee in my house. Literally, I just stop, get up, and go, are you making coffee?
You understand how
Yeah.
vampires feel.
Yeah, 100%. And sorry, just to pick up on the thing, Jasper, that he's a Civil War veteran. You know how Edward has taken with him the traditional values of his time.
Yeah.
I really hope Jasper hasn't taken with him the traditional values of his
Yeah.
being in the Confederate Army and all.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, you were saying. I just thought I wanted to point that out. Slightly awkward thing that gets brushed over.
Oh, so many things in Twilight. get brushed over.
Yeah.
You don't actually know much about Alice's backstory in the movies,
Oh, yeah,
but I
also
think
has-
in the books, and maybe even in this, my illustrated guide,
awesome.
you find out. So basically, when she was a human, when you're a human and then you turn into a vampire and you have special abilities, you probably have something similar to that when you're a human. So, like Edward, for example, was good at reading people, like
Right.
empathetic,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So then he became a mind reader as a vampire. Alice, I think, could actually had some premonitions of the future when she was human. So she was taken into an asylum,
Yes, I remember
which is
that.
why her hair is cut all like that as well, because they did
Okay.
that to her. And she doesn't remember much about her human life. Vampires also forget a lot about their human life unless they think lots about it. So it starts to become fuzzy sort of
Okay, so
memories.
easy to forget, yeah.
but she just doesn't have any recollection of it. And she was turned by someone other, I think someone maybe within the asylum, something like that. And I think as well, I want to say there's a connection to James or one of the other vampires that we come across that isn't explored in the movies at all. And I think there's a link to one of them knowing more about her
Yes,
backstory.
yeah.
And I can't remember exactly what it is.
I guess this is always the problem with movie or TV show adaptations, that they can only put in so much. Like even say the Dune movies that are out recently, there's so much that they would need a 5-hour long movie. And believe me, Dune Part 2 was excellent, but after 2 hours out of 3 hours, I needed a piece so bad, but I chose to stay. I held it in the whole way through. And I actually didn't enjoy Dune 2 that much. I loved it until I wish I just brought a bucket in with me or something.
Yeah, sometimes
Empty
the
the
movies are
popcorn
so
bucket.
long these days.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Before, like, I remember watching the Pirates of the Caribbean, the third film. They had an intermission, and I was like, they used to literally have an intermission
Really?
halfway, yeah, because that was extremely long. And it was, at World's End, there was like an intermission at the cinema. They said, oh, yeah, it's gone on for like an hour and 45 minutes. We're going to have an intermission. And I was like, yeah, for really full long
Amazing.
films, they used to do like an
They used
intermission
to do that.
to
They
give people a
should.
break. But I think they realized if we cut out the intermission, we can play this film back to back to back to back and roll in the
Mm.
dollars.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
they really should.
Mm.
The Sound of Music had an intermission as well.
Yeah.
It's all very considerate because otherwise you risk holding it in and not enjoying it as much or missing a little bit of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess they could. I guess it's about money because, like, you know, they let intermission. They can't screen as many screens that day, but you can still go out and buy more snacks. I guess, unless people just
Sure.
go to a supermarket down the road and then sneak in
Probably.
more snacks, which I always do. I ain't paying
Oh, yeah.
10 quid for a
100%.
small bucket of
100%.
popcorn.